to me, come to me.
Good morning, wherever you are. We are so glad that you've joined us today. I'm Martha Sinkula, your service leader. Welcome to the Umpqua Unitarian Universalist Congregation. And because of the increased COVID cases, we, with utmost safety for all, we continue recording from home. Getting back to the sanctuary will occur when it's safe for all of our beloved community. And in the meantime, we stay in touch with others. And we're so grateful for the technology that keeps us all together. Our speaker this week is Reverend Dennis Reynolds. He is logging in from California. He's traveling. We're very fortunate to have him here. He will be available for the after sermon Zoom discussion. Every Sunday sign-in begins at 11:15 and with conversation 11:30. Look for the Saturday evening email with the Zoom link. Also, check out our previous services and discussions on YouTube, anytime on YouTube. We thank Michael Wheeler and Lucy Swangham for their work in producing these videos every week. Our chalice lighting words are by Stephen Kendrick. We are here to face the truth about ourselves, about the faith we love, and the ways it presently serves others and the world, as well as we open ourselves to ways it can be better and more joyfully reflect our potential and core values. We say we are open and diverse, yet it is too easy to feel stuck in old pasts and stubborn habits, reflecting not so much our tradition as our comfort. We want to answer the call to service to a world that needs our message, our hope, our revised energy. We are gathered to learn, to unlearn, to hear, and to move forward.
Come sing a song with me. Come sing a song with me.
Our reading today is number 592. It's in our gray hymnal. If you have a gray hymnal at home, turn to 592 and participate if you wish. It is called The Free Mind by William Ellery Channing, who was a leading Unitarian theologian in the early 19th century. I call that mind free, which masters the senses and which recognizes its now reality and greatness, which passes life not in asking what it shall eat or drink, but in hungering, thirsting, and seeking after righteousness. I call that mind free, which jealously guards its intellectual rights and powers, which does not content itself with a passive or hereditary faith, which opens itself to light, whensoever it may come, which receives new truth as an angel from heaven. I call that mind free, which is not passively framed by outward circumstances and is not the creature of accidental impulse, which discovers everywhere the radiant signatures of the infinite spirit, and in them finds help to its own spiritual enlargement. I call that mind free, which protects itself against the usurpations of society and which does not cower to human opinion, which refuses to be the slave or tool of the many or of the few, and guards its empire over itself as nobler than the empire of the world. I call that mind free, which resists the bondage of habit, which does not mechanically copy the past, not live on its old virtues, but which listens for new and higher monitions of conscience and rejoices to pour itself forth in fresh and higher exertions. I call that mind free, which sets no bounds to its love, which, wherever they are seen, delights in virtue and sympathizes with suffering, which recognizes in all human beings the image of God and the rights of God's children, and others itself of a willing sacrifice to the cause of humankind. I call that mind free, which has cast off all fear, but that of wrongdoing, and which no menace or peril can enthrall, which is calm in the midst of tumults and possesses itself, though all else is lost. I'd like to introduce Dennis Reynolds, who came to the ministry after a 30-year career as a preschool teacher and an administrator at the University of Oregon. He has since retired to Eugene after serving churches in Oregon and Washington State and as a hospital chaplain. He's been an activist both locally and globally. And just recently, he has been appointed by his Eugene church as community minister for his work in racial and environmental justice. He believes that the most powerful sermons are often those with a news source in one hand and a religious text in the other. He enjoys lifelong learning and the practice of crafting sermons. Our congregation enjoys his wisdom and wit and his ability to share his authentic self with us. Dennis.
Good morning. Today I want to talk a bit about the courage to change our minds. And I want to begin with a couple of stories. The first is about my father, or rather about me and my father. My father, Frank, grew up in the Great Depression and came of age in the midst of World War II. He describes how he celebrated his 21st birthday in a foxhole in France. And then he continued to be part of the Allied occupation service forces in Germany. After the war, he went to college on the GI Bill and financed the first family house on a GI loan. He was active in the American Legion and deeply proud to be a veteran. He had a deep faith in the United States government and in its actions. He, not surprisingly, supported the United States involvement in Vietnam, which he saw as necessary to stem the tide of world communism. His attitudes about that political philosophy were shaped in large part by the reports of the excesses of Stalinism and his own firsthand views of what authoritarianism could look like that he had seen in post-Nazi Germany. I had very different views. In our family, the generation gap became a canyon far too wide for either of us to cross. The differences began in my teen years. In 1968, I supported peace candidates, and I served as co-chair of high school students for Robert Kennedy in Salem, Oregon. In college, my anti-war sentiments led me into increasing activism. I participated in the new mobilization protests, and I began to consider draft resistance. I became involved in Students for a Democratic Society, SDS, which viewed the war in a wider lens as being part of a larger pattern of American imperialism. In time, I not only participated in demonstrations, I helped plan and lead them. In the spring of 1970, I was arrested in an act of nonviolent civil disobedience, occupying the president's office at the University of Oregon. When Dad heard what I had done, he was livid. My sister, who still lived at home, reported how angry he had become because for a time, my father and I did not speak to each other. When I began again to come home for additional weekend visits, we rarely spoke. Anger seemed to well just below the surface. Finally, one weekend, when my Uncle Jack was staying with us, the subject of our widely differing views was broached. Jack sought to see if he could understand my anti-war positions. As the three of us sat a little bit tensely, each of us on the edge of our chairs in the family living room, our very different viewpoints emerged, and we spoke. And as we spoke, the tension increased. We were soon in the midst of a bitter argument. Finally, my father shouted, "You are a communist." I fired back, "And you're a fascist." My dad, who served in World War II in Europe and had fought and risked his life to battle the Nazis, angrily rose from his chair. The veins in his forehead swelling and his fists clenched, and he began to move towards me, clearly intending to lash out. Uncle Jack jumped to his feet, and he placed his hands on my dad's chest to stop him. "Frank," he said, "you don't want to do that." He then looked over his shoulder to me and said, "Denny, I think you need to get out of here." I did. I left the house. After that, my dad and I did not talk for months. I returned to school, though I seldom attended classes, and I began increasingly involved with SDS. That spring, the organization took a dark turn. In some people's views, nonviolent civil disobedience was deemed inadequate, and some began to call for a true revolution. I was not amongst those advocates for greater violence towards violence. And so I ended up leaving the organization and the movement. and I ran away, first to the Oregon coast and later to the Hawaiian island of Maui, following some surfer friends. I had changed my mind about if and how I might help to end the war. I dropped out, both from college and from the anti-war movement. While hiding out with my surfer friends in paradise, I received a letter from the Selective Service System. I had let my student deferment lapse. It was a letter calling for me to fly to Honolulu for a draft physical, which I expected to fail. You see, when I had had my pre-college physical just a couple of years earlier, my doctor had identified a curved spine, scoliosis. And so he wrote me a letter saying I couldn't do strenuous physical education classes like weightlifting or tumbling or self-defense. So I was pretty sure I would be 4F and wouldn't be able to do basic training. Well, it seemed that the condition that had been documented and reported 2 years earlier had corrected itself, perhaps in part due to the Kundalini yoga classes I took to meet that physical education requirement. When I passed the physical, my pondering of possible draft resistance became a right now issue. I met with a draft counselor and applied for conscientious objector status because I not only was opposed to the Vietnam War, but was opposed to war as a means to resolve international conflict. Now, my journey through the selective service system is a story for another day, but today suffice it to say that it meant I needed to return home to Salem to make a personal appearance before the draft board. I've been home from Hawaii for just a few days, carefully avoiding any meaningful conversation with my dad, when one weekday he came home for lunch, which is something he did frequently. Shortly after he left, I noticed on the dining room table an envelope with a letter sticking out of it. The return address was from the United States Congress. I picked up the letter and opened it. It was a letter from my father's then Congressman, Al Ullman. It read, "Thank you, Mr. Reynolds, for your support for my vote in favor of the Hatfield-McGovern Amendment to end the war." It seemed my father, who I had come to see as an uncompromising, dedicated hawk, had begun to advocate for an end to that war. He had changed his mind. I was, to say the least, surprised and pleased. When Dad came home that evening, I told him I had read the letter. He looked me in the eye and he said, "You were right." And then we didn't speak of it much more. We didn't really discuss what it was that had led him to that decision. But it was a big change. Whatever the change was, it was a change that caused him not to merely change his opinion, but to question what had been a deep faith in his country and his government's decisions. To use Channing's words, he had resisted the bondage of habit and not mechanically copied the past nor lived on its past virtue, but had listened to new points of view. It seems that in addition to all the gifts my father gave me in my growing up years, he had given me yet another teaching, affirming by his actions that we're never too old or never too ingrained in our views to be open to changing our minds. We never talked about what led to it, yet we both understood that the change itself was the important thing. In the days and weeks that followed, he even offered financial help, for what would become my legal challenge to the selective service system. He said, I disagree with what you are doing, but I understand it's something you believe is right. Thanks, Dad, for the loving support and the courage to change your mind. I too, over time, have changed some of my own fundamental and all too central beliefs. I grew up in the 1950s in a quiet, suburban, small town city neighborhood. Our household was socially conservative, though politically somewhat liberal, and many in our community seemed to share those kinds of points of view. Gender roles were closely prescribed. Men had certain roles in the home and in society, as did women. To engage in behaviors or express acceptance of anything contrary to prescribed notions was unacceptable. I remember how in middle school, when I took on the unconventional yet necessary task of washing my own very odoriferous gym clothes, I made the rookie mistake of washing them all in one single load. You see, because those gym clothes included a red sweatshirt. It resulted in my t-shirt and my shorts being tinted, and worst of all, something in the fabric of my jock strap caused it to turn a bright pink. I was mortified. Another washing salvaged the gray shorts, and I had another t-shirt, but the undergarment was undeniably pink forever. At the beginning of gym class on the following Monday morning, I quickly changed my clothes and rushed into the gym. It was only after the class that I was outed. When my peers saw my pink attire, I was subjected to catcalls, cruel ribbings, and branded with what was then the cruelest word a middle schooler could use to describe another, a fag. I was devastated. My cheeks turned the same color as that undergarment. And my pain came not only from the cruelty of my peers, but also from my fundamental belief that they were right. Any expressions of something other than predefined appropriate male behavior was something to be scorned and attacked. I was just as homophobic as were my peers. And I held on to many of those beliefs through my high school years. Later, when I went off to college, early in my first term, I auditioned for a play and was cast. I loved acting. I loved the whole scene about the theater, and so I soon changed my major from speech to theater. And in that community is where I first encountered openly gay and lesbian people, many of whom became my friends. I began to change, and my homophobic beliefs began to wither, though I still saw those members, those who loved members of their own gender as very different from myself, as other. In the midst of a sunny morning when I was in my mid-30s, all that changed. My then partner, Helen, and I were visiting for the weekend with her friends, John and Bryce, who lived in Seattle. On Sunday morning, we lingered together over a delicious brunch. John and Helen reported that they wanted to run an errand. Bryce and I, meanwhile, chose to have another relaxed cup of coffee. And as we said, I asked him, "So, how are you?" He answered, "Actually, not good." Have you ever been that place in a relationship when you reach out to your lover and they just turn their back on you? And it happens again and again and again. I knew all too well such pain, because that was the reality of my own relationship. As I offered to Bryce my sorrow for his unhappiness, I shared with him my own pain, and we quietly wept together. I realized something that morning I should have known all along, that love is love. Grief is grief. But most importantly, love is love. Who we love is individually of deep significance, and yet the universality of love is at the core of our being. Again, I looked at Channing. I call that mind free, which sees no bounds to its love. A free mind is open to such understandings. A free mind is open to change. Idolatry is a belief or cast aside when we open our hearts and minds to continuing change. Sometimes the changes are enormous and difficult and time-consuming, like learning to be self-critical and challenge one's faith or fundamental political views, or deconstructing biases like homophobia and heterocentrism. In Channing's time, the center of such work was to seek to abolish the practice of slavery. Yet, as he pointed out then, the work of true liberation is to free our minds, including to free ourselves of the excess baggage of notions we once thought were true. We need not carry such burdens. The same is true when we look at a world in which facts can change. A few weeks back, the writer Aprova Manishvili authored an article in the New York Times. It's titled, "The US is Getting a Crash Course in Scientific Uncertainty." She wrote, "Scientific understandings of the virus changes by the hour." The problem is that such inconsistency can seem to offer to some reasons to trust science. For as Mandavili notes, Americans are living with science as it unfolds in real time. The process has always been fluid, unpredictable, but rarely has it moved at this speed, leaving citizens to confront research findings as soon as they land at the front door, a stream of deliveries that no one ordered and no one wants. The unfortunate truth is that science changes and may deliver results that are not what we would hope for. And then those evidence-based findings change as the data changes. Most of the time, the shifting scientific analysis happens more or less behind closed doors. Yet during the pandemic, the seeking of truth by sifting through the data, the often messy process of figuring things out has taken place in public. Such analysis is the most effective way of getting to the truth. As a t-shirt that I bought last fall reads, "Figuring science, figuring things out is better than making things up." When our minds and our hearts are open, we can all use such methods to figure out how we might take part in crafting a world that was more welcoming, inclusive, and loving towards all. I found that my language choices can play a role in creating a more inclusive environment. In recent years, I've sought to assure that those who do not easily fit into binary categories of male and female also are welcomed by my words. To do that, I often use my own gender pronouns, he and him, in many of my communications. And I've strived to become more comfortable with the singular pronoun, they. At first, I found that awkward and uncomfortable as it did not fit into my definition of proper English. It was a change, a different way to use language. Over time, I found it easier and more comfortable. It even became proper. The singular pronoun they was Merriam-Webster's dictionary's word of the year in 2019. Changing can and does happen. And we can be part of making the world a place where peace is more common than war, where we are all free to love whom we love, free of marginalization and discrimination. We can create a world where all are included. A free mind can offer to all of us the means to enact such changes. May we all, as Channing urged long ago, resist the bondage of habit and not mechanically copy the past, nor live on its old virtues, but rather listen for new and higher monitions of consciousness and rejoice to pour ourselves forth in fresh and higher expectations. May we, with free and open hearts and minds, set no bounds to our love. May we delight in virtue and sympathize with suffering, recognizing in all human beings the image of God and the rights of God's children, and offer ourselves to the cause of humankind. May it be so. May we work to make it so. I invite you now to join in a time of silent meditation. It's a meditative form we've done together before if you've been part of these services for a while. It begins, as some will recall, with hands open in front of us. Open hands, open and ready to receive whatever may come. Then after a moment, breathing in, take whatever comes to your chest and hold it against your heart as though your life depends upon it. And then when the time comes to let it go and exhale. Turning open hands over so they may receive again. Open. Hold. Let go. To be open. Receive. Hold. Let go. Open. Hold. And let go. Open. Hold. Let go. And let's end today just spending some time with hands, heart, and mind open in a time of shared silence. And then let it go and take one last cleansing breath deeply in and deeply out. Thank you.
Let it be a dance we do. May I have this dance with you through the good times and the bad times too. Let it be a dance. Let a dancing song be heard. Play the music, say the word, and fill the sky with sailing birds. Let it be a dance, let it be a dance, let it be a dance. for joy a time to cry. Take it as it passes by. Let it be a dance. Let it be a dance we do. May I have this dance with you through the good times and the bad times too. Let it be a dance. Morning star comes out at night. Without the dark there is no light. If nothing's wrong, then nothing's right. Let it be a dance. Let it be a dance. Let it be a dance. Let the sunshine, let it rain. Share the laughter, bear the pain. And round we go again. Let it be a dance.
Our benediction today is by Kirby Capo. Our time is finished, but our work is not done. May our spirits be renewed, and may our resolve strengthened as we meet the challenges of the week to come. The chalice flame is extinguished until we ignite it again with the spark of our communion. Salam, shalom, amen, and blessed be. Go now in peace.